All right, my friends, we are back. Happy Friday to everybody. We've got a special live stream event today. We're going to be talking about MadVR Envy. We got David Frangioni from Modern Drummer. David does a lot of things besides drumming. He's an expert custom installer. He's got his own integration company, as you guys know. How's it going, David?
Going great, Gene. Great to be back. I love being a special guest with you. Doing this thing regularly is amazing. And thank you, everybody. We have a great, I think this would be a great topic for us to share. It's there's not a lot of really deep and accurate information out there on this topic, believe it or not. So I think we're going to be able to deep dive in a very specific lane that's very applicable to a lot of high-end home theaters.
So full disclosure, I know nothing about this topic. I know nothing about this technology. This is new territory for me. As you guys know, Audioholics is mostly audio based, but of course we like a good video picture as well. I'm on a learning curve when it comes to all this new technology that you're about to present to us, and I'm happy that you have a guest, John Bishop from MadVR Envy. So David, why don't you give us a little tour of what this is all about, what your background is, how you know John, and what this technology is and how it can help enhance people's video.
Thank you, Gene. So I'll start at the beginning and I'll keep everything relevant to today's topic. Let's get some context, because I think especially on a subject like this, MadVR Envy, context is everything. So we rewind for a minute. John Bishop and I have now known each other as friends and collaborators for at least 25 years. We have always pursued a very, very deep passion for the best video quality we can possibly bring in a home. And, one of, I think, the turning points that we were able to kind of be out front on was when Sam Runco invented the Cinewide CinemaScope with true anamorphic video resolution and geometry on a native 235 or 240 screen with masking. And that was really revolutionary. And then it's evolved from there. And here we are today. And John and I are back at it again with what we believe is another huge paradigm shift in terms of evolution for high-end video. And that is this relatively new processor called the MadVR Envy. Now, I'm an integrator who uses and specifies the Envy in certain applications. This is not a one-size-fits-all box. This is a high-end box for very specific solutions. But what it does uniquely and it does extraordinarily well. I personally use two of them to show clients and to be the processors in two of my high-end video systems. It's most often used in a front projection system. And we'll describe why and what it does. But it really is an extraordinary processor. And again, I want the context to be that this is for very specific installations. It is not for everybody who has a display or everybody who's into video. It's for people that have specific types of home theaters and want to achieve the best results in the easiest, most reliable fashion. And that is regarding HDR very specifically. It's regarding up conversion of the video signal. It's regarding subtitle management and some other things that John's going to get into that are really special about what the MadVR does. And it's so great to be back with John here with all of you. We work together on an almost daily basis on high-end projects. So without further ado, the maestro, John Bishop.
How are you? It is a thrill to be here. And as I said before we were getting set up, I listened to a few of your podcasts, specifically on immersive audio. And I'm on a technical committee within CEDIA, the Standards Committee on Immersive Audio Sound System Design. We're developing a recommended practices document. And it's so refreshing, David, to hear you talk with the passion that you have for what it's doing on the creative side. And we're discussing how to bring that to end users of all stripes, from fairly entry level to the moon. And the passion and detail with which you spoke, and Gene, your back and forth and sort of deep passion for the artists that are creating this stuff. It was just very cool to listen to. And I felt very shy about even joining you guys on this call today because you are really out there. You guys are just doing great stuff.
Appreciate that.
Thanks,
So, having said that, the special purpose of the MadVR Envy Extreme, if I can take that particular model as the example, is to wrestle with this new thing we have, which is the next revolution. As you said, David, this is not a small change. You were referring to immersive audio, but it's not like going from the iPhone 12 to the 13.
Right. No, it's like the
it's a
CinemaScope
big deal.
Like
and
the CinemaScope days, Cinewide.
It is. That was the revolution that we had 20 years ago. And it drove such an exciting time in home cinema design where we had things to show clients that they just didn't know was possible. And when they did see it, they flipped out over it. And you were expressing that. You know, not only on the immersive audio, I listened to the drummer guest that, Gene, you couldn't get to come on. And
yes.
Of course, all David does is make a phone call or shoot out an email.
Gavin Harrison.
You've got a guest.
Yes.
That was also very, very interesting because his passion on what he's creating and all the challenges he ran into is exactly what we're dealing with HDR. So this title slide, which has been sitting here for far too long, comes from a series of seminars I've been doing for the CEDIA Tech Summits. I'm sure all your listeners know who CEDIA is, and they have these regional events where they've got products on display and a little expo area, and they've got seminars that are presented by industry people. And my topic on behalf of MadVR, Barco, and Stewart Filmscreens was achieving a great experience through premium projection. And the difference between HDR as a projected image and what most people have experience with is dramatic. You can't go into Best Buy and find what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And you said it also in your various podcasts that I listened to. And these are shots of David at the Fort Lauderdale event.
Oh, yeah.
I was very proud to have you come out, I think, just to see what I had set up there and attend my seminar. On the right, there you are sitting in the seminar as we got going.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, my little quote here, when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace. That is probably a quote, you know, David, among, very few others, is from Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
What we're working on is a little more difficult than that. I think getting HDR properly rendered in a home cinema with front projection is a mystery that people have not figured out. So, yes, it's hard to describe, but in a short clip, you get it. It's like no experience you ever had. That is a quote by a guy named David Frangioni. I just picked up that quote last night.
Nice.
Well,
quality just got better and better in the early days, and then the quest for quality ended. And of course, you're talking about MP3. As we went through all those audio formats and things got better and better and better, then boom, convenience ruled the day, and MP3 happened.
Right.
But as time moved on, we came back out, and now the new, developments, the quest for quality, as you put it, took over again, and now we're in the immersive audio age. And when you combine HDR imaging with the immersive audio and they go together, you have something that is as powerful or more powerful than CinemaScope and surround sound was 20 years ago. I have the same passion that you have shown over these other issues. And it is a big and interesting challenge, as Gavin Harrison said.
Nice.
I couldn't believe how on target the feeling I got from your podcasts that I just took a look at last night after I talked to you, David. Yep. When you said you were doing these regularly, I said, well, I'm not just going to listen to Gene's products of the year. I'm going to listen to how you guys interrelate and what you're talking about. And it was just blowing my mind. So getting projected HDR up to the Dolby Cinema level transcends the TV experience. Dolby Cinema is the place anyone can go and see what we're talking about. Other than that, David, they have to go to your showroom and see it, and a few other places that have it set up properly at the level of Dolby Cinema. And I don't want to sound overly pompous. I'm saying properly and so on and so forth. But I'm saying that there is a standard you can look to and the target that you can create from understanding that standard. And it is Dolby Cinema, and it is the original technical documents that Dolby created around HDR. And it has gone off on a side, road in the television world. And that's where we are. Projectors have a difficult time doing it properly unless you put the ingredients together. And the center of managing that is the MadVR Envy.
So John, I was talking to a good friend of mine, Jason Dustle, the other night. He's one of the top ISF calibrators, and I knew nothing about your technology, and I told him you were going to be on, and I'm like, what do you think about this? He goes, it's a game changer, must have if you're serious about front projection.
Well, yeah. let me jump in for a second before John continues, and that is to say that the reason it's a game changer, one of the reasons, John will cover, the several big game-changing things that it does, but the first one that we're talking about now in HDR is that you can send an HDR signal to a display, and you can put settings together in that display, in many displays and many projectors, not all, where you have a setting for what the mastering level of that signal was done at, for the video mastering level, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, whatever it was. And then when the signal is seen by the projector, it will render that HDR, and it'll get it, pretty close based on whatever you have it saved for. Well, if you have the HDR setting for 1,000, and then the next movie that you put in is at 3,000, you have to have an HDR setting for 3,000 as well. Not only do you have to do that, but you then have to see the picture and be able to recall which setting do I need? 1,000 or 3,000, 4,000 or 5,000, 900. What is it? You have to have presets. You have to manually recall it. This is not only complex for most people, but it's time consuming. And then on top of that, you have the native aspect ratio that's coming in. And what is that native aspect ratio, and how does it size properly based on the screen that you have? These are the two most fundamental elements of getting the optimal picture from the source to the screen. And that's where the MadVR is a game changer. So I'm going to let John take the ball now, with that being the setting and the context of.
So David, quick question for you. If you have a kaleidoscope, doesn't it have that data for each movie you're watching, and it could actually recall those settings?
Yes and no. Yes and no, Gene. And I will say everything you just mentioned, David, I would say other than that, there's nothing to it. But when you do get it, when you've got all of that managed, and it can be managed, the difference is, as I say here in the quote line, not subtle. It's like going from CRT to flat panel. This is next gen. That's quote. I'll say that's from Gene and David last night. So, and that the heading below, getting it right for a single title is challenging enough, and for everything, forget about it. Ain't gonna happen. And you said it absolutely perfectly. All of content is mastered at different levels. I am doing something, and I changed my lighting and camera, so I don't know exactly what you're seeing. But if you're seeing my screen, little image snippets going by, I'm playing a script that I created on my Kaleidoscope Strato of every single HDR title on it. There's 100 titles or so. And I've got a 2-minute clip from every one, just playing out forever. So I can be at a trade show and it plays out. Some of them are at 10,000, some of them are at 4,000, some at 1,000. They're all over the place. And I can hit a button. I don't know if you'll see the menu in my camera view. Yep. You might, but it's over there somewhere. Of the MadVR incoming signal menu. And it tells me down the line, it's changing to the next clip. So the next clip comes up. There's going to be a cover art, and then it'll play the clip. And there's a little dark time in between. And that's too much dark time. Let me see. Signal coming. That's a long transition, so that's probably a bug in my script. But I'm playing all of this without touching anything because the MadVR looks at every single piece of content, not by metadata, and that's the difference, Gene. Other Kaleidoscape and others all look at metadata, which is available on the disk. The problem is the metadata is not reliable. What the MadVR does, and that's why it's a 5U high computer box filled with electronics and NVIDIA's fastest graphics card, is looking literally at the pixel values, the values for each pixel, and it knows that the code value for the brightest pixel over this movie is X, and it can place that on the PQ curve, which is this sort of like gamma created for HDR. Again, Dolby is credited for a lot of this work. And once you've placed the maximum luminance value against the clip point of your display, the projector, you now get a perfect rendering of the image, the same way it's done in a Dolby Cinema. IMAX is also doing it. They specially prepare their files for their 6P laser projectors, and they look identical. So having said that, let me move on. Early implementations were gimmicky and missed the artistic intent. It's another quote from last night, but now when we get it right, it's the genuine art. And this is a sea change. Again, we are back to a quest for quality. We get HDR imaging with immersive audio, and it is a great time for home cinema. That's what this is about. This is a shot from a well-known retail operation whose initials are Best Buy. And these are just this is in the Magnolia section. So these are their best TVs just presenting HDR content. I'm telling you, you have to put sunglasses on. You have to squint. This is not how it looks in a cinema. It's bright, it's colorful, it's not art. It's children playing with neon crayons, as Michael Gann used in one of his editorial arts pieces. So this is me, just a little bit. I call myself a personal cinema architect, and I'm doing work on behalf of Barco, MadVR, and now I've added Steinway Lingdorf. So I'm looking forward to working with Room Perfect and some of the things you also talked about, David. I worked
with Steinway to bring him into the U.S. Steinway Lingdorf helped Peter Lingdorf with Room Perfect and other early innovations, the Model D, the Model C. So I know the product inside and out.
And Peter was on one of the home theater cruises. I don't know if it was the one you were on, Gene, but I was setting up a VX44 Runco for the next day. He was setting up, he was doing his thing with Room Perfect and his sound system. And he was there until, I left about 2 a.m, and he was still there. And it was like just really something to we were chatting as we were working. Very intriguing. So I also have a sales agency in New England, and I've got a relationship with James Loudspeaker. The Mavericks Architectural Cinema is a division they created. That's a little bit in hibernation due to COVID, but I look for a resurrection of that. I've got some very cool things happening on that front. They're doing some phenomenal loudspeaker designs for cinema. So the HDR projection revolution, which MadVR is in part responsible for. This is a theater. It's got a 10 by 18 foot director's choice screen with a Prometheus 3 DCI projector. This is a $200,000 ridiculous projector in a ridiculous environment, ridiculously designed by Dolby Cinema and Realm, the dealer in Norwalk, Connecticut. And it's a phenomenal space. And what's great about it is I can look at DCI rendered content and compare it with the stuff that we're doing. This goes back, and on the left, Gene, there's one of the home theater cruises right there. We're announcing it, and that's me and Sam Runco and Gary Reber Greg Caves, and it's fantastic. Those are some of the magazine articles I wrote just on that topic of CinemaScope. I was so excited about that. Sam called me the godfather of Cinewide. I was so voracious over this thing. And now maybe I'm the godfather of HDR projection. And I got a Rep of the Year award, and a guy signed it for me. He had a theater, and I was tweaking it, and he liked my ride. And he said, "Wow, can I check it out?" "Sure, when I'm done with your theater." And he signed my Rep of the Year award. And that looks like TB12, a recently retired, really good quarterback. And that's the ride he was impressed with back in 2002. An RV that set the world land speed record at Bonneville. It's not quite 140 miles an hour, but it's somewhere between that and certainly over 100. And that's Tom Brady and me sitting in there. That was an awesome moment. This is Joe Kane, and I was at a what they now call a VIXA, a commercial show, to see the new micro LEDs. And this is something that Planar showed us, a 1.2 dot pitch that was doing an 8K image in an 18 by 33 foot size. And the quality is there. So these seminars I've been doing, there's a topic, and it's focused on the business opportunity, and I think the experience opportunity for end users, the biggest advance in cinema design in 20 years. The purpose is to expose this shockingly different way to do HDR image and sound. And I call immersive audio and what you need for the dynamics of cinema together HDR sound, because high dynamic range is what separates a hi-fi system from a cinema system. And if you can put the audiophile performance back in and still achieve the dynamic range required of cinema soundtracks, then you've got something special. And that's why I'm connected with the James Loudspeaker company and their quad tweeter array and beryllium tweeters that go out to, it's just amazing levels and performance. So the vision is to turn this opportunity into active demonstration and sales so people can see it, and to show the design process and examples that illustrate it in this presentation. And I think, Gene, you were going to say something maybe?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions for you. Number one is, what's the primary streaming sources when you're using this technology? Do you recommend something like a Kaleidoscape or a HD, Ultra HD Blu-ray, or is it also applicable for streaming Disney Plus, HBO Max, that kind of stuff? And then what happens with Dolby Vision? Because there is a lot of content in Dolby Vision.
Awesome questions. It's like I could have slipped a note across the table, said, "Ask me this." If you'd have asked me 3 years ago, I'd say streaming is going to be, you don't want to watch a movie with that because you're going to have a hiccup and a problem, or it'll throttle down. They throttle according to the bandwidth, how many users are on your node and all of that stuff. And all of a sudden you're seeing a reduction in resolution. It used to be buffering spinning wheels. I mean, they figured that out a long time ago. That's not acceptable. But you don't see the spinning wheel, but you might see a resolution change and not realize it because it's gradual. And so there's an author named David Thompson, and I constantly bring up his book. It's a little book called How to Watch a Movie. And he's a great writer and film critic and so forth. So he's done some serious, sort of intellectual texts. But this is a pretty casual text. And the takeaway for me was, you only get to see a movie for the first time once. And after that, it's a different experience. That first experience, think of, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Audiences that saw that for the first time, I mean, it was emotional. That's what the art of movies is. It can elicit any kind of emotion, fear, anxiety, just all of those things. You laugh and you cry, you're afraid, you're happy. They are manipulating us with a story. Can you imagine any kind of change in image quality, an audio dropout, and that does happen with streaming, let alone a video dropout at a wrong moment when you're watching something that's worthy of being called a piece of art? That's my issue with any kind of streaming. Having said that, I'm watching stuff on Disney Plus, HBO Max, Apple TV Plus all the time. And mainly because it's day and date. I can go to a Dolby Cinema and IMAX, see what it looks like, and come back to my cinema the same day and watch it that night and see, am I on the right track? So that's my answer to the sources. The best sources are the physical disc and a streaming system like Kaleidoscape. You've got the bit rate, you've got the guarantee of no problems, quote unquote. And that's what I want to watch art for the first time with. No question about it. Your second question was Dolby Vision. And I had a conversation with the chairman of the HDMI committee within CEDIA. And he said, brilliant guy and a brilliant committee. It had all the right people on it. And they had a section on HDR. And it really made HDR look like good, better, best. HDR10, HDR10 plus, Dolby Vision. That you had to be up to Dolby Vision to see the best picture. I debated that with him. I might have even, I'm not going to say his name because I think I won the debate. I think he came around. Dolby Vision is not a cinema artifact. It is an artifact of consumer electronics. It is designed to help TVs that don't have the same characteristics of a projector handle the dynamic range and fit it within their capabilities. And TVs vary. OLED, LCD, different colorimetry capabilities with quantum dots and this and that, all of those things. Mainly, it's a system that says, I'm getting messages from the content, make changes to the gamma and other parameters of the image settings when you get this message. And it says, at time X, make these changes. At time Y, go back to the previous changes, and so on and so forth. Do you think there's a chance there could be a problem with the timing? Engineers and technical people on the cinema side say there certainly can be, and there have been. But what it's doing is simply moving content around the gamma curve. When you do what I described early on, it's a little bit technical, but you guys went way technical, so I'm not afraid to talk with the actual details in mind. When you know what the maximum value, code value for luminance in the pixel structure is, you simply place that at the clip point of your display. If your display is capable, and projectors in the class that we're talking about are, it now has mapped that content with simple math. The PQ curve is a mathematical function similar to a gamma curve. It's sort of a combination of gamma and the Barton curve, which is just another formula. They put them together and everything gets placed properly. Every image, average picture level, dynamic range within the picture has been created and locked down. That's what you see in a cinema. That's what we used to see on Blu-ray, a locked down encode and decode system. Because of the dynamics of the mastering levels and so forth, we're not locked down in HDR. But MadVR allows you to, as if you were using all the controls real time as an engineer. With this new movie, I now know where it belongs. I can then let it play and I get the full dynamic range of the movie. It will never be pushed up average picture levels or pulled back to unclip or to push the dark areas up, which is a compression. It's a dynamic compression. The only way you can get the cinema experience, in my mind, is with an HDR10, which is on every HDR piece of content. It's required as the base layer. And then these dynamic metadata functions of HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision are added to that to push the image around. I don't see that as better. I see that as another way to get the best results out of whatever display you're using. But what we're doing is what is done in cinema, what is done in an IMAX and a Dolby Cinema. We have a file that is designed to match the display, and it renders it perfectly. Long answer to your short questions, but those were important questions, and people think about those things. And I think in the consumer world, some of it is not quite on the money.
So would this eliminate I often see when I switch from SDR to HDR on a source, the picture tends to be too dark, but then the colors are way too bright. Like you said, like pastel. It looks artificial.
Yes.
Would
Yes.
would this
This
video
solves that, Gene. This
what's
solves that
that?
because this changes the tone mapping and the mastering levels. It changes what's overdriving it or underdriving it, where it's either clipped or too dark.
Yeah.
Is that the HDR setting in your display is not matched with what the source is. So some of the content won't look dark, some of the content won't look clipped, some of the content will look one or the other. With the MadVR, all of the content looks right. John, why don't you expand on that? Because that's kind of one of the key things that it does.
And the reason is, and I do it all the time, because now I'm doing support for Barco and MadVR all over the country and the world, because it's I'm team viewer in. I'm logging into these devices, and I've got a FaceTime or a Zoom connection. I'm looking at the screen, talking to the guys, and directly looking at their Barco and their MadVR, and making adjustments which are almost universal. There are tricks. There's some secret sauce to making HDR content render in our home cinemas the way you see it in a Dolby Cinema. But what almost everybody does is they'll look at a scene and they'll say, oh, this looks too dark. And they'll start playing with the PQ values, the HDR values, whatever that brand of display is calling it. And now that will look better. Well, what they did is they took a scene that the director wanted to look dark, and they made it look brighter and more colorful. And that scene was brighter and more colorful. Play out the movie, and there's crap instances everywhere. You just don't know when you're going to step on that roadside bomb, and it's going to go off, and it's going to be just wildly clipped, wrong color levels, and color in the absence of the dynamic range that was supposed to be there, so it looks right, or too much dynamic range because you lowered the level artificially, and now the color jumps in a way it wasn't intended to. All of those things, all of those variables are removed.
So we got an interesting comment here.
MadVR. And I'm getting to it because here's the next slide. The ingredients that make it happen are the right kind of projector technology, and I'm a biased person. David mentioned Runco. I go back to the early 90s, the earliest days of home theater. Those were CRT days, of course, but we were moving. We were trying to get what theaters were presenting in real, quality commercial theaters, reference theaters in Southern California and New York and Fort Lauderdale, quite frankly, and Miami. But we always had that goal, and we always emulated it as best we could. Today, in this collection of products, we're using exactly the same technology that cinema renders HDR. It's DLP. It's the color imagery, the white field uniformity, the flat field. The canvas is pure. The adjacent pixel contrast right down to the single pixel. With that technology, you can surround a black pixel by white pixels and not turn it gray. That's why the detail has such depth in cinema and in our home cinemas when we design this way. So there's, that's just me. When you point whatever the display is at a screen, that focus pattern in the middle is an actual screenshot of that pattern, and that checkerboard pattern are single pixels, right? Look at the contrast there, held down to the single pixel level. You can't do that with any other technology. A single red, a single blue, and a single green pixel is visible as such and properly saturated from a viewing distance. Those are little things that go together to create what we're now living with, which is not emulating what can be done in the best experiences of cinema. We're duplicating it. We literally have a Dolby Cinema image in our home theaters with this technology. And by the way, you see 5K I'm throwing around here just to explain that. That particular projector is the one I have here in my lab. And believe me, my cinema space is a lab just like your audio space and cinema space is a lab for you, David. I heard your reference when you were talking about your up-firing forward speakers in your Atmos setup. So 5K just means that projector is a 2160 by 5120 pixel device, as opposed to by 3840, which is 4K. It's a native CinemaScope projector that gives you some real advantages. And MadVR created a mechanism for delivering its output in native 2160 by 5120. So it is 5K capable. One of the first people, I think, in the world to see it was David. And I think you liked it.
Well, I helped beta it. Yeah. And it's, that's another thing. There was a comment, Gene, that I saw earlier. Somebody was talking about how Richard, the innovator and CEO of MadVR, he is constantly tweaking, he and his team, the tone mapping and the capabilities of the box, et cetera. And that's true. There's a lot of consistent progress to their credit, and you can just download it right into the machine. So it's very simple to stay up to date. But the point is that 5K was brand new at the time when I was given the privilege of trying it. And I, as does John, I have a 5K native Barco projector, and yeah, it was very nice. I mean, it definitely took it up a notch. I wouldn't call it night and day, but I would call it noticeably better. And as we're talking about here, it's the accumulation of various important aspects of the source material, the aspect ratio, the tone mapping, HDR, the resolution, etc. It's the subtitle management. It's all of these different things that when you get all of them that right, and they're all right on and at the proper level, etc., then it's night and day. And that's what the Envy's capable of. And it's a very exciting product. So John, why don't we talk about, can you put up on the screen again that window of the incoming signal so we can show all of our viewers today that level that we're talking about, because that's really a key technical piece to what this is all about. Like, that's because it changes with every piece of content, this particular mastering level number. And when you see it, that's what the MadVR is looking at for its luminance levels, and it's a real game changer in that regard. So that's a menu choice. I see John's getting his rig together. So while he's doing that, we've talked about the tone mapping and how the MadVR looks at this, the pixels, the signal, etc., the mastering level, gets it right. But the aspect ratio control is another really big one. Automatic aspect ratio control. So nowadays on front projection, we're used to having a preset that when the source starts playing, we
see
hit
the logo.
We do. Yeah, we see the MadVR logo.
All right, so then my camera will be in a spot where I can show you that. And
okay, cool.
Not to interrupt, but you said something so sort of profound. They're always making adjustments and tweaks. They get feedback from all over the world. You wouldn't believe the quality of the technical people that are users and also contributors on in the support group. I'm part of the support group, and I've got my own expertise. And there are people that are just sort of deep into different aspects of imaging. And what came up the other day, and I mean just the other day, there's a piece of content that the multi-aspect ratio feature, the quick turning.
You might want to point the camera up a little bit higher.
Incoming signal. Do you see that menu?
Yeah, you might want to point the camera up a little bit higher so we can see
higher?
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. So there's a piece of content from Strato, which is Mission Impossible Fallout. Fantastic movie in terms of demo quality, and it's a multi-aspect ratio movie, meaning it has IMAX scenes and scope scenes. It goes back and forth, and the closing finale with the helicopter chase and all that, it's going back and forth. Sometimes it only spends 10-15 seconds in the IMAX format, then it goes back to the scope format, and on a scope screen the MadVR changes it so quickly with no black image, insertion, no artifact. It's instant. It's as fast as a film edit. It's amazing, except it stopped working on the Strato only. it would go to the IMAX version, and then it wouldn't come out, and scope would simply be letterboxed in the IMAX version from then on. And it was a weird thing, and I reported it back a while ago, and my disc is fine. I can even find it in streaming sources, depends on the service, but that multi-aspect ratio function works fine. Well, a dealer asked on the support group, and the mad scientist behind MadVR, a German engineer by the name of Matthias, came back and said, you know, I looked at this content, and I fed him some specific stuff. We all gave him the exact scene. I said, here are the conditions. Here's how it comes back. I can just pause and restart, fast forward, rewind. It finds its memory. Boom, it goes back to scope. He said he found that the black bars in that one piece of content have video levels below 64 bits, and they pop up and go away. You're not supposed to have any level below 64 bits. That's the video bracket for black. And if you have actual values below that, well, it thinks you're a 16 by 9 piece of content. Something's happening down there. But they're very low values. And he said, so I've got a mechanism for detecting that kind of condition and locking it out. And boom, it's a fix. I mean, first of all, he found that issue by looking at the pixel structure and those code values, and then he created a fix. That is unbelievable. It happened in a matter of 48 hours. And for one piece of content, I've never seen anything else that did it. And, you know, Kaleidoscape, if you know their story, they get mezzanine files directly from the studios. Sometimes they're higher file sizes and bit rates than you can get from the disk. And so that's one of the benefits of a Kaleidoscape system. And so somebody delivered a mezzanine file, and it's got some stuff down there that nobody in the world would see that wasn't using pixel structure to determine aspect ratio, which is what we're doing. We're not sensing black bars. We know the pixel structure. And if you go to a movie called Midnight Sky, and I think it's HBO Max, but it was streaming. George Clooney, in COVID year 1, at the end of the year, he released that movie streaming, and I'm looking at it, and it's showing in my my incoming signal. So there, my incoming signal says this movie is actually at 237:1. That's the pixel structure on the disc. This showed 2.11:1. I have never seen an aspect ratio in 2.11:1. I said, ha, I got him. The system made a mistake. I found one movie that's 2.1. That's John Wayne's first movie in 1930 called The Big Trail. Actually an amazing movie. It's 2.1 because they shot it in 65 millimeter and 35 millimeter simultaneously. They literally made 2 movies at the same time for, you know, the dramatic release. You know, they've got a show type release and you know, festival release, and that's what they did. I went to IMDb and looked, and that film was shot at 2.11:1. Some Alexa camera has a native imager of that shape, and the director of photography decided that's how we're going to do it, and that's what it is. And we rendered every pixel properly on the screen because we look at that structure. So
now, John, can you please call up that window again, and let's point out the HDR level that we're referring to. Okay, there it is. So
that's the aspect ratio.
Yeah, that's the aspect ratio. Then go up a little, and there's the level.
That's the yeah, right. So that's what I
can't see it, but tell us what
3473 nits.
Okay, 3473.
And it's HDR PQ, right? Yep. So it's following the PQ curve, which all the content we care about. Broadcast will be HL, hyperlog gamma, HLG, and but most of the content we're ever going to see is rendered according to the, you know, that creation by Dolby of the PQ curve.
And there's the level.
So all of this data is the incoming signal, and then this is the data on the outgoing signal.
Right. So guys, when you see the incoming signal level we're referring to, as John changes content, that 3100 and change level is going to be different on the next set of content, and the MadVR is going to adjust for that.
That's my point. It's placing the content in that optimum spot on the PQ curve for every piece of content that it hits. And what we're trying to do, and I don't know how this slide is rendering for you guys, but there's a nice image at the top, which is kind of what we're used to in the Blu-ray world. And there's an image on the bottom that has more dynamic range, darker darks with detail within those darks. You can see on my slide on the lower left, in the land part, just that little strip of land part, the very lower left, there's a little green reflection in a window and a little red one above it. That rendered on the screen would be only a few pixels. We're trying to make an HDR image able to show all of that detail, where we've got a color volume and color saturation, dynamic range, that sun that's trying to set around the building is not clipped. There's detail there, that you're seeing the clouds rendered with detail, not washed out. And even the reflection in the water of the sun coming towards the camera, and the camera flare on the left, the color of it. We're seeing all that when you get HDR right. So that's kind of what we're doing. And in this presentation that I do, seminar for the tech summits, and I do it in the field all the time, there are some concepts that matter. The first and foremost, there is a reference, and you find it at Dolby, IMAX, and DFX cinemas, among others. Concept 2, that experience has been defined by Hollywood. It has not been defined by television makers. It's been defined by Hollywood, where the art is presented in cinema exhibition. And that those components are the image fidelity and viewing geometry, and the sound fidelity and dynamics. Those two phrases encompass everything that matters. The third concept is we have been in pursuit of a genuine cinema experience, and it produced 2 early revolutions. One of them, and the biggest, was the CinemaScope one that we've talked about, and one prior to that. The CRT era gave us big images for the first time. So we, outside of the small group of people that had actual film projectors, 35 millimeter film projectors for movies, but we were making big images for the first time and having a lot of fun in those days between, 1990 and 2002, 20 years ago. Then we went digital and widescreen. The fourth concept, the performance parameters of a genuine cinema experience can be defined in sound, image, and spatial terms. The fifth is just the lab experiments that David does and that I do can confirm that we're on target. The sixth is there is such a thing as an audio cinephile system that can be engineered for superior and repeatable performance. Forget that last part. That's not an end user's interest. And concept 7, the tools to create that genuine cinema grade HDR experience can be automated for guaranteed results. That's MadVR. I can create the image that I have right now without the MadVR using my Barco. Rick will dispute that with me. But the fact is, I can create a profile for 4,000 nits. And I'm making every adjustment, mainly the HDR value that places it on the PQ curve, and then save it as a profile. And I can do another one for 1,000 nits, another one for 10,000 nits, a fourth one for 500. If I have 3 and I call them low, medium, high, for most end users, I've covered the gamut. It's not perfect, but everything will be rendered well. But I have to hit the right button. That's the problem. I have to hit the right button. And there are more buttons. Like if I was doing it for myself or for another sort of engineer type person, I might have 10 buttons. Try this one, this one, this one, this one, and which one is perfect. And you'll find the one that's perfect, and boom, you go watch your movie. MadVR does that for you by looking at the pixel values, the code values for each pixel, and placing it perfectly. From an end user standpoint, do I want to depend on making the wrong choice or the right choice myself, or having my dealer available just before I have a Super Bowl party, for example? Not that that's the HDR movie topic, but I want my system to be perfect. I paid for a perfect system. I was shown a perfect system. But in the meantime, I've done a few things here and there, and it's not quite perfect. MadVR makes it perfect every time. It's a guarantee for your customer's
So how
experience, and as a dealer for you know that it's as if you were there. Your customer is seeing what you sold them. Go ahead.
So, John, how much of this is all automated versus how much does the end user have to go and input or tweak settings movie to movie?
There's an initial setup, and that we'll get to, and then there is no interaction required on the end user's part. It's all automatic.
Yep. Gene, the only thing you have to do as an end user is change the masking of your screen based on what you see, but there's nothing you do with the MadVR. It's all, once it's set up, all the aspect ratio, all the tone mapping, the subtitle management, etc. The output resolution up converted to 5K. All of it happens just automatically. You just watch content, adjust your masking, and go.
Okay.
Right.
Then the other question
you can automate that as well, but there are some tricks, and the control system has to be capable, as does the screen.
Yeah. The other question I have for you is, I understand you said it was like a 5U box that does all this processing. Down the road, are we looking at potentially productizing this technology into a front projection system? Will the technology scale to the point where you can implement some of this into a projector or a display or a source device or anything like that? Or is it always going to be a separate box?
Well, I'll never say never, but the technology requires, the size of that graphics card. That thing's like, 18 inches long. That's a big piece of equipment, and it requires a processor to drive it. You really have to have a computer to drive it. You can't get that all on a chip.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it would require to include it in a display, projector or any other type of display. What's happening now is metadata is being used to drive certain parameters, or maybe flip from one preset to another preset. So you can do some rudimentary things, but you can't do it at this level. So I think it's an outboard box for some time. Hell, let's try to get it down to 2U. I don't know. Rack space is pretty precious. So
yeah.
I'm going to flip through this because it's it's important because it is the reference, and I want to explain how I concluded this, because a lot of this sounds like just, this guy is just talking the way he wants you to believe, and what's the legitimacy of it. So I've probably got 50 movies now that I've audited in Dolby Cinema and IMAX, and that I've got a spreadsheet that I started doing during COVID times. I had a lot of downtime, and I had a beautiful theater with a Bragi, and then later the MadVR, and I started looking at what does it take to get this right. I'm seeing clipping. What are the scenes that clip? What are the values? What's being reported as the metadata? And I did a spreadsheet. It's mastered at this level. It's this native aspect ratio. Here are scenes that had clip points. Here are scenes that had maximally dark points. And then I play with the PQ value to optimize. And I find that things that say they were mastered at 1,000 nits all kind of come out in a similar setup. The values are similar. And so then I got to the point where I could just bracket 1,000, 4,000, and 10,000 nit stuff. But the first thing is, what is correct? So these are, reference cinemas that I haunt to see what it looks like in theater. So these are screenshots that I took with my phone. Those are the real colors of the Marvel logo. And I put the camera, first of all, I go in and I sit in the first entry row, where it's not the first row, but it's right in front of the beginning of all the rows behind. Usually handicap seating is there, and I can get a nice spot there, and there's a little bit of a wall behind me, so I can be there with my camera display turned all the way down. Nobody can see anything or hear anything, and I take screenshots like you wouldn't believe, because you never know when you've got a good shot that will tell you something. And so these shots of Shang-Chi, shot in a Dolby Cinema Burbank, which Dolby engineers will say is one of their best examples, gives me clues as to the color gamut and dynamic range of that content. So these scenes are shot in that theater, And it so happens that when the Dolby Cinema version ended, I always walk right into the IMAX theater. You know, I don't buy another ticket. I just walk in, and I'm seeing the same. They were showing the previews, so I sat through the same movie 100%, beginning to end, and captured all of these shots. On the left, you can see that is Dolby Cinema in scope format, and on the right, you can see that is IMAX in the flat or 1.8:5:1 format. You can kind of see that Dolby is a 32-foot Lambert standard luminance, and IMAX is 22-foot Lambert standard. I mean, you know, these camera settings, you know, cameras can fool you, but I've been doing it long enough that I kind of know the settings where what I get is very close to what I see, my perception. And so that's what these are. And, you know, this is Top Gun that played in Dolby Cinemas a couple of years ago on their, was it 20th anniversary? And just look at the color depth and the color range. We never saw that in theater or on the discs. So moving out of that and onward, there are things we're trying to do with HDR Cinema sound and image design, in both the architecture of the loudspeaker design and the sound system and the image components there at the bottom. So in these examples, it's a Barco DLP, it's the HDR tone map to match laser cinema, a Lambertian surface from Stewart's Filmscreen, a Kaleidoscape and Ultra HD disc sources, and the MadVR Envy to manage everything. HDR tone mapping, aspect ratio management, nonlinear stretch when you're using that feature, and subtitle management when you're using that feature. So this is all talking about that. These are training slides that I did, but this is a lot of, this is the Dolby Cinema at Times Square, right? So I started going there years ago. This is a Dolby Cinema in Danbury, Connecticut. These are SLS loudspeakers. I compare the sound. These are JBL Atmos loudspeaker system in a DFX. It's a Barco Laser DFX Cinema by Galaxy Cinemas, and I catch these images. You know, I catch the different sound formats. You know, this is a surround speaker. IMAX is a 12-channel immersive audio system, right? Well, that can't be as good as the 42-channel system at Times Square for Dolby Cinema. Well, it can be and it can't be. There are different things that can happen, including the localization issue, the timbre matching issue, you know, getting the tone and frequency response right, and the dynamics. And certainly there's no question about the dynamics of the IMAX system. So these are theaters. This is a boutique cinema in Beverly Hills called the New Beverly Cinema, owned by Quentin Tarantino. And I went to see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is my T-shirt here, okay, there, to expose the truth. I'm a big fan. And I saw the 50th sold out showing in a row there, and it was an experience. It's a 10 by 24 foot scope format screen. It's got four-way masking. They started out in 1.8:5 to show Rosemary's Baby, the trailer, which is a 1.8:5 movie. Then they started with the Bounty Law black and white 4:3 clip, you know, the basis of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And the masking closes down to 1.33. And then the movie starts and it opens up to scope 240:1, and the movie plays out. One of the best presentations in a cinema that I've seen, and we can do that in our demonstrations and for our customers all the time. We can automate everything to that level. This is the Samuel Goldwyn Academy Theater. This is their seating plan, and the green are the locations of 3 rows of seating in a home theater design as they would relate to the viewing geometry in the Samuel Goldwyn Theater. And so if I have a 16-foot screen in that room that placed the green rows of chairs in those locations in the Samuel Goldwyn, if I go to an 18-foot screen, they'll move forward a few rows. And if I go to a 14-foot screen, they'll move backward, and that back row won't even be in the theater. That's how I help end users and teach dealers how to properly size screens to match the cinema experience.
So John, let's go back to the Envy. So this is all this context is crucial, but let's go through the the process of being able to evaluate what is right, because you've taken such an exhaustive approach to really understanding reference. And I've seen the spreadsheet. You've shared it with me with all the mastering levels and all the data you've collected, and it's awesome to be able to have that understanding. So how does that relate to the Envy and what is available now to basically replicate the IMAX and Dolby Cinema world-class theatrical Hollywood standards?
I'm glad you asked. And yes, I am building a foundation, that sound, image, and spatial issues that we're trying to achieve. So when it comes to the image, which is going to get me right to the Envy detail, this is what matters to Hollywood. These are the things Hollywood is struggling with. This comes from a presentation I did on doing DCI theaters in homes, masking and controlling it, and how good it looks when it's masked properly. This is a 10 by 24 foot screen in a private theater that we did in New England. There's without masking and there's with masking. So all of those things are important. But when you get right down to it, here's what the Envy does for us. This is a DCI projector. We thought we had a great image until I said, I don't think we've got HDR being handled properly. And the engineer that was with me on this job said, you know what? I see an incoming 709 signal. Somehow our EDID is asking for the wrong signal and we're converting it. That happens all the time with consumer projectors. With sources, Apple TV can be put in a mode where it sends SDR out as an HDR signal, which is fake and usually oversaturated. Here's what happens when you get it right. So just going from accepting the right signal is going from here to here. And that is about 3 years.
It's night and day. Look at the orange in the center figures coat.
It's the color gamut, the saturation, and the dynamic range all rendered properly using a DCI Cinema projector and the technical detail that goes with it, which are the sidebars. Then what's the content look like, right? It looks like that. And here's, this is a system. We took a $100,000 projector out, put a $200,000 projector in. 1080p SDR to 4K HDR. And I told this particular end user he didn't need to do anything for years about 4K. Then HDR came and I said, you know what? You can do something now and you'll see the difference. So first, this is that Dolby Cinema at Realm. And there's a reference DCI projector up high in the port. And I bring every model in there and I map them with my settings, with instrumentation to match the image, no clipping, the right color, all that stuff. That's how I get to the conclusions that there's a way to do it and get it right. This happens to be my theater I'm sitting in right now, so you don't need to see that because I can turn the camera around and you'd see it. That's my little lab in Maine. And this is the MadVR and the Bragi demo I did for my old friend Jeff Haas in Southern California, Haas Entertainment. He's got a 16-foot screen, David, and I shot the Bragi on it, right, which is designed for a 10-foot screen, 12 at the most. But we were doing 9-foot Lamberts. But the image, because we had the dynamic range, the proper rendering that the MadVR helped us achieve, and the image really looked like that. The dynamic range, the white field purity, the color saturation of the flesh tones, perfection. And it's at 9-foot Lamberts. So there's not a standard required light level to make it all work. There is an optimum, I think, which is the 32-foot Lamberts. I sort of adopted what Dolby Cinema is doing in commercial cinema, because if that's what the art is designed for, that's what I'd like to see in my theaters. And you get a good balance of black level and dynamic range. This is a test disc. And it shows what goes wrong when Envy is not involved. That's a washed out picture. You'd kind of maybe not know it for sure, but if you look at it, there's really washed out. And now I've just added the Envy, as you can see, to fix it. And there's what the image should look like. That detail in the foreground and the background wouldn't be there if you didn't hit the right PQ value, which is with a DCI projector, you have to set up macros and an automation, and somebody still has to push buttons. It's almost like you need a projectionist. And you can do it but I mean, this is a billionaire home, right? He's got this theater is probably $3 million, something like that. So it's ridiculous, but here's his projector. As you can see, that's a Prometheus 3. And I just walked in with the MadVR, set it up, and showed them. And it blew their minds, and a few tricks that you have to do. This is an end user with the same thing. I set this up remotely in August, and then went out for the Florida CEDIA Tech Summits and visited his home. We've got the Envy there in the rack to dot the I's and cross the T's and show him how awesome his theater was. Basically, we have all the ingredients. We've got the right projection technology. We've got the right screen technology and the processing to make it all come out right. This is some of the screen talk. You get into that. Very nice little theater. That's the same projector you have, David, on his 14-foot Studio Tech 100 screen. And these are just images that, everybody thinks Cruella is a poorly rendered movie. It's poor until you get the HDR right. And then it's a stunning movie. It's fantastic. It's not only, it's good entertainment, but it's also good color imagery. And I'm kind of showing that here. And I'm going to move on, and you're going to see some stuff. That's the homage to Mission Impossible that we now fixed the auto aspect ratio functions for. And this is Blu-ray. You've got to get Blu-ray right, and the settings for Blu-ray are going to be different than HDR. You're going to break a couple of rules to make HDR look correct, and you can't break those rules with Blu-ray. So that's what, oh brother, where art thou looking proper? And this is a mobile lab. When I'm in Southern California, I'm in a trailer, fifth wheel, but I'm still doing tech support and research. And these are the menus that show, for example, nonlinear stretch. And this is how psycho Matthias is. He's into cinema. These are not all the aspect ratios that are rendered by the MadVR. Like I said, 2.11 will pop up. Gojira, the original Japanese Godzilla movie, is 1.47 to 1, pops up correctly. It's freaking amazing. This is a heresy. This is Charlie Chaplin's City Lights. It's a movie that is actually 1.19 to 1, which you can see down there, third line from the bottom. That's the actual aspect ratio. And I'm doing nonlinear stretch to fit it to a 178 window. Sometimes,
so John, pause for 1 second, please. I want to describe that nonlinear stretch is an innovation. It's specific for CinemaScope screens, 235, 240, 237, etc. And what it does is it takes non-native CinemaScope material, such as that shot in 235, 74, etc., and it stretches it and fills the screen. So what's the most, obvious thing that comes to mind is sports, right? It's done in 16:9, the Super Bowl on down, and you have this 235 screen, for instance, and it's much wider than the native video is being shot in. And so nonlinear stretch takes that, and without just making everybody wider and distorted and weird looking, it actually properly stretches it. And the Envy, for the first time that I've ever seen this, because Runco did a version of nonlinear stretch way back. They called it virtual wide, and it had its own algorithm, and as it got further to the edges of the screen, it did more of the fattening, if you will, the widening, so that the middle center part of the screen looked more natural, and it filled the screen, but it was pleasant to watch. And what MadVR Envy has done with NLS, and it just keeps getting better and better, is you can go in, you can actually dial in where you want the geometry to stretch, and the end result is that you can really enjoy on full Cinewise screens 16:9 content. That's what nonlinear stretch is, so we can define it.
Well said. And you made a very good Runco reference. Virtual wide was actually 4:3 to 16:9. When our first plasmas came out, we were before HD broadcast began, and everything was 4:3. Some stuff was 16:9 on satellite and a few first places, and people wanted to fill their screen. So we did a nonlinear stretch to make that 4:3 stuff fit 16:9. When we did Cinewide, we did it again to make 16:9 content fill scope. And we called that virtual cinema. So, but this is Martin Scorsese saying, come on, man, don't mess with my art. And that's how I feel about altering the shape of a movie's aspect ratio. Sports, no problem. And that's what the rest of this is. This is the dashboard of that helicopter in Mission Impossible. That's the way it is. It's an IMAX scene. It's rendered as a 16:9 image. If I do this to it, have I harmed it? No. The director might think so, though, because I cut off the part of the dashboard. You know, you see 2 rows in the upper right-hand corner. Well, there's 4 rows. Is that a big deal? I don't know. But they don't want you messing with their art. So I don't do that too much. I've done it for customers who say, I don't ever want my scope screen to not be filled.
Yeah.
So when they're watching 185, they have a nonlinear stretch. And you can automate this, Gene. You don't have to hit a button. You can say it's active by default. And when it sees 185, when it sees 2.0, when it sees 2.2, it takes it out to scope. All of those are individual settings to do it with the least distortion, but you can make it automatic. Or the opposite, you can make it off by default. And then for 16:9 stuff, you can then say, I'd like to turn it on as an end user. And there are people with scope screens that will do that for the Super Bowl. I do it for sports. I was a big fan of it for sports and still am. So,
well, I have a scope screen, as you do, John, and I use it once in a while on 16:9. The great thing is if I don't have it in auto, I like to control if I want to use NLS or not. But the great thing is that if you do have it in auto and you always want the screen filled, if 235 comes in natively, it doesn't stretch. So it knows, okay, the Envy knows you have a 235 screen, this is 235 content, and it's perfect. Now it also knows you have 235 screen, this is smaller than a 235 for native content. You've enabled NLS. Okay, we're gonna stretch it out. I don't recommend that. I think that it's more enjoyable for most content to watch it natively, and then here and there, the big games or whatever that you can get into the stretching, and just hit a button on your Crestron or Control 4 or whatever. But it's it's there, and it's just another option to just display content however you want to see it. Gene, are we getting any questions or anything that we want to answer?
Yeah, and I want to make sure you guys realize the time we're approaching, like an hour and 15 minutes. So we probably want to.
We're gonna wrap it up. We're gonna wrap it up.
What would you like to call the witching hour?
What's that?
You want to end shortly, Gene, or give?
Yeah, I would say I'd say we just answer a couple of questions and then we'll wrap it up. And if we want to do a follow up at some point, we could do that too.
Yeah, good. Let's ask some questions.
Someone's asking here, what about 16:9 to 235? Same possibilities with Envy.
I didn't quite catch. What is the question?
What about 16:9 to 235? Same possibilities for the Envy.
Well, yeah, that's what we were just talking about. So, I've got the screen up here. Please set your monitor to 16:9. That's the opening screen of Grand Budapest Hotel. So, and it's got multiple aspect ratios, 185, this is 133, and then scope. And what the MadVR does is handles that all automatically. The nonlinear stretch is, and this is a famous Batman scene. Here's what happens when you put it in scope without regard. You fix it in scope, you change the scene. The artists aren't going to be happy with that. So if I move forward here, and I'll get past some of this stuff, which is rather technical, profiles you can create. These are all, the menus are simple, but coming up here is going to be a more direct answer to that question. This is the Haas Theater, actually. That's how many buttons you could have in the projector to do everything you want to do as a lab rat. That's my lab rat projector. I can
without a MadVR. That's without a MadVR.
That's without a MadVR. That's how you figure out what right is, and then you get the MadVR to do that as well, and then make it automatic. That's what's cool about it. but I think my slide's coming right up here. Let me get past this stuff. We'll address the nonlinear stretch stuff. Well, I can't skip that one there. That's the RGB laser projector. I did my DCI training at Rancho Cordova, Cineonic, which is a Barco company. And in the back, that's the projector that is basically the IMAX component. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but it's a 6P laser projector that's in large format theaters and so forth. This is a look at Sony's premium large format theater in Las Vegas. I think it's closed down now. They got out of the cinema business. But you can see the top is the DLP and the bottom is the Sony technology. There's just a little more contrast and colorimetry there. These are the projectors that do what we're talking about. And this is the 5K capable MadVR. And in here, these are great theaters. So I've got, these are good slides. This is a system. This is a complete system that's been designed to hit a certain target. It's $1.25, and it shows, you know, I've distributed about 30 grand into the audio, about 30 grand into the projector, and about 20 grand into the screen. When you balance things that way, you're liable to come out pretty good. I've got about 30 grand in the loudspeaker system. That's a cinema grade system for rooms up to about 6,000 cubic feet. It's a 9.4.5 system. I favor the Oro, not for its codec, but for its loudspeaker architecture, where I've got a little better angle from the listening positions to the elevation speakers. And Wilfred Van Balen is very passionate about what it takes to bring the ambience of reality into a space that you can really perceive as the listener, and still reveal, you know, objects in three-dimensional space, which is what we're trying to do. All of that. These are documents I've created for guys like David, architects and engineers documents that talk about the specifications of the components and how they're rendered. And well, this is good because this is that's a woven screen. That's a microperf screen. You see how the checkerboard contrast is getting better, and that's an opaque screen. That's why I try to do opaque screen designs when I can and use perimeter loudspeakers. And these are the loudspeakers that I tend to use that have that high dynamic output. Quad tweeter array just gives it a 12 dB advantage over any single. So this
you're
is
talking
really,
about not using.
I'm at the end of our slide deck. So.
Now, virtual cinema. Wait, Gene, go with your question, and then let's get John back to NLS. What were you going to ask?
So you're talking about opaque screen. You mean not a acoustically transparent? You're talking
correct.
About
That's correct. Yes.
So, John,
that's becoming an issue in our standards committee discussions because we've got what they're calling generically solid screens, which are micro LED screens. Well, you can't have speakers behind those.
Center channel behind it.
So it's an issue cinema is trying to address, but. As I said to the group, Don Stewart told me at one point when I was visiting that they got an order for like 30 or 40 commercial cinema screens for a theater chain in Europe. And he called them and said, this must be a mistake. You haven't requested cinema perf or micro perf. And they said, no, these are opaque. We want the best possible video and audio. So we have a perimeter designed loudspeaker system. We're going to shoot the image on an opaque screen. And that's always an option. And we're trying to build that into our standards and recommended practices at CEDIA.
Right.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot for people to take away from this today, Gene, don't you think? There's a lot
pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, we've just and some parts of this are scratching a little bit of the surface, but other parts are very much a deep dive. You can see there's a lot to it. I think one of the lessons from the overwhelming nature of it is that one of the reasons that John and I specify the MadVR Envy is because it takes all of these complicated, settings and and mastering levels and aspect ratios. And once it's set up, you just watch, you just view it. So yes, it's high end. This is a high end solution. There's no question. Of course, it has to be mated with at least some level of high end projector, ideally with the proper screen as well. But in that setting and in that signal chain, it's a very powerful piece for many of the reasons that we talked about today. And I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I hope everyone will come back and reference this video in the different parts of it that apply to whatever it is that they're trying to achieve with their video goals. And John, thank you for everything you do for the industry and for joining us here today.
So, it was my pleasure, and I do tend to go deep, and I do tend to go fast, being aware of time. But I will conclude with this. Our topic was the MadVR Envy, and the extreme model is what we focused on. So I don't want to forget to say its purpose in life, its special purpose, is to do all those transforms, the color and the luminance and placing on the PQ curve automatically, the automatic aspect ratio adjustment and detection, the nonlinear stretch feature, as well as all the image enhancement and subtitle handling features. And it does that in a way about 1,000 times less complicated than I made it sound today.
Interesting. John, we got one last question I want you to answer, and then we can wrap it up here.
Okay.
I'm going to read it to you since I don't think you can see the screen right now. It says, I think you're, oh wait, that's the wrong one. I think you're insane. Hold on. What happened to it? I think I lost the question. Here it is. Okay. Is advanced geometry correction going to be available to the Envy Pro or exclusive to Extreme? Also, when will HDMI 2.1 input be available?
Those are great questions. Every feature we talked about is available on the Pro or Extreme version. The difference really is the Extreme uses a faster NVIDIA card and is an upgradable platform. So 2.1 can be added to the Extreme. It's not there yet. And we don't really have a reason for it in projection 4K. It really, I mean, we already do 8K 60. Barco just introduced a projector model that does 240 frame rates coming out of the simulation market. So for gamers and doing extreme high frame rate stuff, a faster card and 2.1 will be required. 48 gig will be required. But at the moment, everything we're doing with cinema content up to 4K 60 can be done with either model. Rick will tell you that the Extreme does, because of its speed, some of the processes sort of in parallel and renders a slightly improved image, sort of like that 5K story. I look at different test patterns and I go, oh, the 5K has the edge here. Then I look at something else, the 4K has an edge there, because somebody's going to upconvert it to the display, native pixel structure of the 5K Barco, either internally in the Barco or externally in the MadVR. And to me, it's a toy cost, but a very interesting concept. When we get to these other sort of faster frame rates, and I'm not sure 8K is ever going to make sense, quite frankly. 4K does, because cinema works in the 4K world. There's no 4K cinema content being created or exhibited. So
8K.
That's my answer to that.
Yeah.
No 8K content being created. And there is 2.1 output on the Envy, but not 2.1 input. But that's a great question. And they're both.
Well, it's 18 gig. It's not 2.1 in the terms of bitrate. It's an 18 gig machine.
Yeah.
Right. Just 2.1 compatible.
Right. Well, David, John, appreciate you guys coming here, dropping some knowledge on the channel. I definitely like the video focus that we're doing with this presentation, and I want to have you guys back, perhaps just to discuss screen materials and the challenges there, both acoustically and with video. That's something that I'm dealing with personally in my own home theater, and I definitely would love to address that with you guys in a future video if you want to come back.
Hey, we're a team, and we can cover a lot of subjects when it goes off into these particular topics and the cinema arena.
Awesome. Yeah, last comment here we have, John. You've rewritten the reference image video thesaurus. Well done. Today's presentation available in a PDF. So if you want to make your presentation available, I can put it on our Patreon channel. John, if you want to send it to me, I'll put it on our patreon.com.
Yeah, I can share some stuff. You're certainly welcome to share the article that I sent to you, which covers a lot of this. I don't think Widescreen Review would object to that. It's my article, and those are my notes. And but we'll talk offline and see if there's some stuff. I'm not sure this slide deck makes a lot of sense without notes.
Yeah,
but I do have some assets I did for the CEDIA Tech Summit and for some CEDIA trainings that you might like.
So guys, don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support to the channel. You get unique aspects here. We put some PDFs for further information on these topics. You get direct access to us if you want to suggest video topics, or if you just want to ask questions or, whatever. We always appreciate your support. David, John, thanks again.
My pleasure.
You, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you, Gene. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. It's a pleasure and honor to be able to speak to all of our peers and everyone who's passionate about audio and video out there, especially in home theater and home applications. So very grateful to you, Gene, and the Audioholics community. Until next time.
Me too. And Sam Runco says, take a shot of tequila. It's good for your health.
It is, for sure. I need some Juan, I forgot which one I like. Juan Julio. I forgot. I was in Mexico once. I had this incredible tequila, but I had too much of it and I forgot the brand. But anyway,
that's what tequila does. Yes.
Yeah.
This is actually Shanghai. I went to a tour in China in 2019, about 9 months before COVID, happened, and it was awesome. And I probably won't be going back anytime soon. But this was a party at the Shanghai high-end hi-fi show where we were doing some cinema stuff, and on behalf of James Loudspeaker. In fact, that's Mike Park down there in the lower left, our two guys.
Sweet.
From James Loudspeaker fame.
Awesome. Don Julio, I think, was the brand of tequila that I got.
That's the best. Yeah. Don Julio Añejo is a favorite of mine. It's on my shelf.
Awesome. Well, that's a wrap. And until next time, my friends,